Hey everybody, this is Aaron Hefel. It's the Show Buddies podcast. And I'm sitting here with River Breitbach, who just played the lift about a week ago. It's a great show. And I feel like I have maybe known you my entire life because some of my earliest memories are of the food store. Mm-hmm. And if you're a little bit younger than me, then I can only imagine. So I guess my first kind of like questions are, are you North End, like outside of town? Like, is it Rickardsville? Is that what it is?
Yeah, grew up in Rickardsville.
Okay. Because that's where, tons of Breitbachs, tons of Hefels. Mm-hmm. That's some Northeast Iowa bullshit right there.
Yeah, that is competing weeds.
Yeah.
We're growing like weeds and we're competing.
It's just the amount of Breitbachs, Hefels, Brimeyers, Ludovici's. So it's some of those last names that are just, synonymous with an area. Was music education, was that just kind of like built in?
Yeah, music was the sort of cornerstone effort my parents made. And that's being gracious. Maybe a more realistic way of saying it was that music was the only education we received for many years.
Sure.
Being homeschooled. And that was, something I'm grateful for now. I've gone through ups and downs through the years of being like, Mom, Dad, WTF? Like, entering high school was hard.
Yeah.
Things like that.
So did you go to public high school then?
Went to public high school.
Okay, interesting.
Rough entry.
Yeah.
Rough integration, except for music, in which, concertmaster of the orchestra, like integrated right away. Loved it. That helped me foster relationships and kind of normalize and get, into the scene.
So you were getting like technical, like musical education. Like you were learning like how to read music, mm-hmm. all that kind of stuff. Like from what age?
I believe my first violin lessons took place before I was 3 years old. On a book, before I had a 32nd size violin, I was entered into kind of more of a masterclass setting with Ann Dubuque, who's just talk about someone who has an outsized influence on music in this town and this region and beyond for all the great violinists. So we did Suzuki training with her, and we did piano lessons with Patty Giegrig. May she rest in power and peace. And she was really big on music theory as well. And so that was, something that was a foundational piece of our lessons from those early, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, like taking tests with them, being entered into like the statewide piano competitions.
Whoa.
And, to kind of give the credit where it's due, not only to Ann Dubuque, Bill Rowley from Dubuque Senior High School for just being inspiring and badass and all the things, to Patty's credit in her private practice teaching piano. It's not only myself, but, Michael Gilbertson is one of her former students. And, he's, the runner-up a couple years ago for the Pulitzer Prize behind Kendrick Lamar.
Oh, wow.
So, just to like give that credit where it's due, like she, like so many teachers, I'm sure.
So were you still being homeschooled, but going to their program, and then that was being submitted for like state competitions and stuff like that? Is that what you're saying? Or are you talking about more when you got to high school?
Well, through the Piano Association, there are like statewide, you can do regionals. And, I don't think that I ever progressed past regionals myself. So it was kind of like something we did every year. And then I think one time it was like, oh shit, I passed the first round. I get to go to this other thing and play again. Whereas I'm sure if we dig, we would find that Michael Gilbertson and others, made it good for them, made it every time.
Sure. Okay.
But we were being homeschooled and then driven into town, dropped off at lessons. And I'm at a point in life, and also my parents are at a point in life where I think like a statute of limitations, and the give a fuck is not there in the same way anymore. I can speak openly about the ways in which, they just sort of dropped us off. And it was like, here, take your lesson and then walk on back down to the food store across town.
Well, I mean, to take that one further, it's how old were you when you started playing bar gigs?
Preteen.
Yeah. I mean, I figured as much. I mean, it's like you were a talent that pretty fucking good player. So it's like, oh, might want to bring him along here. I mean, but Jacob was part of that too, right? Like,
right. And being the fourth child of 5 kids, the band was up and running by the time I was born. By the time I was taking lessons, they were already.
Yeah.
I mean, they were performing on street corners, more busking, less of a stage act until I got into those, maybe double digits. That's when we really started to transition, and they're funny times to remember too, because our mic technique. I mean, we felt like outdoor animals let indoors, and you're like, do we?
Well, that's not just you guys. That's
Right.
that's many people, still struggle with it.
Indeed, though we did it with our particular flair, and also want to own, like, our family's a very larger than life type family, and so while beautiful and worth celebrating, we also stepped on a lot of toes and took up a lot of room. And again, with the, like, speaking more openly, is that it's not like being the, like, pro cannabis legalization person that I am. It's not like I didn't get high with my parents,
right? Well, I mean, I definitely, like, outside of being the owner of the food store, and that being probably my first experience with any kind of, like, health food or whatever, that that kind of lifestyle. Like, your dad was one of the first people, like him and maybe John Bly or something like that did the like Freedom Fest down at Camp 17.
Yeah, the Mississippi River Revival efforts. Yep.
I mean, and honestly, I've thought about it before, but those were, along with some of the punk rock shows that I was seeing at that age, I would have been like probably 14 or 15. That, knowing that, like, oh, the guys that run, the food store and the head shop, like, can just rent this place, and we could throw a concert. That's interesting. So, like, that would be right there to me, is like imagining you growing up, with the people who are actually organizing all that. Had to have been wild. That already sets a stage in my head for how interesting that childhood could have been.
Oh, it's chock full of amazing memories of, like, living the dream to a degree, in terms of, like, being at the party at a young age, seeing shit go down, without any real amount of regret or grievance. I can look back and be like, yeah, there was some, like, missing, we made it through. Yeah, that's a kind way of phrasing it. Like, and that's not me being hard on my parents. You can look at any parents and be like, oh, they're just trying to freaking figure it out.
I mean, my folks to a different degree, and a lot of people that I grew up with. I mean, our parents came out of the 60s and 70s, man. I don't fucking know. Like, it was.
Yeah, I did cash in on that when I led the creation of As Above, So Below, which came out in 2023. That record, featuring over 150 singers and musicians from across the state, almost entirely from Iowa. There's a couple special guests who are connections that I have who happen to be either touring through, and it was like, hey, hop in here and lay something down, or that particular flavor I knew I needed. The testament to what that upbringing gifted me was that I created that whole record just by asking people. It was as easy as reaching out, because growing up the way I did, I still am rather amazed. I'm a known person to so much of the music community. From, it still happens to me that people I don't even really know will see me at shows. Just in Iowa City, I was playing with Dodge Street Duo at a place called the Greenhouse. Shout out to the Greenhouse. And I was approached by, Ed and Tanya English, the Tanya English band. blues players. They came up and they offered a generous thank you. And they're like, we've watched you your whole life.
Yeah.
We've watched you play music for your entire life. And for me to be able to turn around and create a piece of art utilizing that, they already know who I am. All I had to do was send an email, send a text, or go show up at someone's house and knock on the door and ask them.
Yep.
It felt pretty cool.
That is cool to be able to
No arm twisting, no convincing necessary.
It's sharing, that's pretty sweet. So you do the family band, you're in it preteen, you're doing that for probably what? It's 5 years before the Tributaries?
Oh, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, because we were hitting performances pretty hard once I was maybe 6-7 years old. And then, there was, not all year round, but we'd go over to Glen on the weekends and play on the street, resulting in them creating a permitting program because we were creating disruptions to businesses by having people stopped on the sidewalk or spilling out in the street. And also small brag for the family band, but that's not the only city that we have been the reason that they've created a permitting program for busking. Yeah. So a storied history there. And then River and the Tributaries was actually the result of meeting Scott Gratton once I started high school.
Right, and he played guitar, right?
He played guitar. He was the other songwriter. To my mind and in my heart, he was the co-leader of the band.
Yeah,
okay. They just all favored that name, and I was the only one who voted against it initially. But
it's catchy. It's a catchy name.
It worked. It worked, and the true spirit of that group, in a number of ways, hasn't actually been reached again for me. I've had many other beautiful experiences, but that was quite the starting point for doing original music, for getting to lead a band, and feel that sort of that fraternal, that love that happens when you are a band.
Because right now you have a few people that you are consistent, but it does change a bit.
Well, the love is in many ways deeper with my bandmates now, and they are my band. What has shifted is the responsibility that I bear as the band leader and making sure that they're paid and that I'm taking care of them. And to that degree, we're not equals the same way that River and the Tributaries. I mean, you can be afforded that when you're young and you're not, you still live at home and you have those other supports. So, but that also goes from that logistical stuff just down to the energy. Now there's a seriousness where, we're still in love and making sounds and experimenting and being playful, but they, and I so appreciate it, but my bandmates have this respect for my compositions. They want to really breathe life into the songs and treat them with respect. Whereas, as I'm sure you remember, River and the Tributaries, we didn't care about nothing. We were just jumping around the stage. We cared, but it was a zany, fun-loving energy of anything can change at any time. Yeah. And that we didn't feel the need to meet any sort of standard. There was no we have to get back to this high water mark. It just felt like.
Did you hold on to any of those songs to do you still perform any of those songs?
I do not, though I have in my intention sort of learned myself a couple of Scott songs because not in a put myself down kind of way, but my songs were not very good. Like so many early songwriters, I look back at them and they're kind of laughably, lyrically vapid.
Well,
that's how it goes.
Yeah.
And whereas Scott, to his credit, a couple of his first songs, I'm like, that's a pretty good tune.
Is he still playing?
He is still playing for passion, but he lives with his family down near Raleigh, North Carolina in Apex. And, he did the sort of maturing, have a family and, there's a quote unquote growing up thing. And he, pivoted. He became a programmer, but he still runs a passion project called, it's a very difficult to pronounce word, which I think it's not non-animal. It's, oh my goodness. Anyway, it'll be in the show notes, but it's a lo-fi funk project where he's more or less embracing that he's imitating Wolfpack, and he brings in local artists and he creates his own compositions, and he's fine with them comfortably writing in that like Wolfpack inspired. And his shine and his brilliance is all still there. He just uses it on the side.
That's cool that he's still playing though. Mm-hmm. That is awesome. So Tributaries do a bit of touring, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, our biggest tour would have been out to Colorado and then out to New Mexico and back. And I mean, we did some other closer to home
regional
type stuff, but that was like the big one where we got the tour van. We had brought a sound engineer with, and I'll give a shout out to him. His name's Darren Hushak. He now runs Pinnacle Sound out of Des Moines. It turns out that tour, and I'm delighted to know this and be reminded of it each time we speak, but it was very pivotal in sort of shaping the direction in his life and very influential, and kind of he credits that to some degree of like putting him on the track that he's on now and running his own sound company. And we've kind of reconnected and are planning the next album with my band to be recorded with him. But that we kind of hold that one tour as like the time
pretty
we got to go out on the road. We got to be a band traveling through, and it included, big highs and big lows, gigs where you show up and you're like, what the fuck? None of this is like we thought.
Yeah.
Nightmare scenarios.
Always. Yeah.
The tour began with a performance at Vaudeville Muse to exactly two people, the sound engineer and the bartender.
I've played that show before.
Hell yeah.
At Vaudeville Muse.
Yeah.
But I've also seen good ones at Vaudeville Muse, and it's R.I.P.
Yeah.
Sad to say. Des Moines has always been hit or miss for me. Not that I've played there a ton of times, but it's just interesting. But yeah, so the first night in Des Moines was rough.
Yeah, well, and small side note for like Iowa politics, but Des Moines has an urban sprawl problem. It's like a city planning issue of where the people live and where the music venues are.
Yeah.
Best of luck to everybody working on that.
Yeah.
But couple of shows out in Colorado that followed. So we did the big drive across Nebraska. We had our minds blown showing up to our first gig, and we're loading in and they're filming a cannabis cooking show. We're coming from Iowa being like, we have to be so secretive and use this language. What were we using as a band? And not everybody in the band smoked.
Sure.
But those of us who did, we would use this language like, we're going to go bowling.
Yeah.
Which is like, of course, whomever's parents' house we were at, we're like, sure, you guys are bowling.
Real bowlers.
Yeah. But, to get out there and be like, what the hell? Like, they're just straight up filming a cooking show using like ganja
Sounds
oil
like a good
and
time.
stuff. So, played some good shows. Really have no memory of like whether we made good money or not. I'm going to assume mid to no.
Yeah.
Other adventures, because that band, had the energy it did. Before we departed Denver, we were informed that, what's it called? American Idol was in town.
Oh gosh.
And so we're busking on the streets in the sort of pedestrian mall of Boulder. We had gone up to Boulder. And lots of folks are like, you all should audition for American Idol. So the band split into two units. There was, myself and Beth Ann and Aaron and Scott.
Okay.
And we all went and auditioned for American Idol, which was, show up at Mile High Stadium at something like 4:30 in the morning, 5 in the morning, stand in line forever, fill out this long contract, which I spent hours reading, to then discover it had like a clause in it that specifically stated that even if you weren't selected, if you were to find your own success within X period, they would still be entitled to get in on that action. So
what the fuck?
Exactly. I mean, these are things, of course, they're embedded in those
stupid contracts.
Yeah. And so I didn't actually sign my contract.
Yeah.
Turned it in. We all got called up to the same judge. It's like little pop-up tents, and they're running just 100 people at a time, probably through these tents. It's like, I can't remember the exact order, but, Aaron, Beth Ann, Scott all sang. I sang like the chorus from Wayfaring Stranger, which is like such a random pick, but But again, like none of my songs that I'd written, if you removed them from the instrumentation, they were not much of an offering. They didn't have much for shape or melody or meaning, without the instrumentation. So I sang this sort of soulful traditional song and had the judge then ask me if I could sing again and sing more modern. And in a sort of smart-ass way, I was like, could you please define what singing more modern means to you? Because I'm like thinking to myself, that means just going, ooh, like lots of flashy vocal stuff, which is still not a part of what I do.
Yeah.
Even though my singing partner now, Megan Elizabeth, she's steeped in it. She seems to have attended the school of Christina Aguilera.
Right.
So that was the short-lived little flirtation. Well, I say short-lived. It was like a 15.
What, did they shut you down? Did they just be like, you don't know what I'm talking about?
Pretty much. You could see in her face. I remember, she was a younger blonde woman, and she just seemed rather unimpressed with my asking that. And I sang.
Can you sound a little more modern?
And so I sang again, and then they were like, "Thank you all," and they offered golden tickets right there on the spot, and you'd hear people scream, and if they didn't, they would just say thank you, and you'd go off. Now that said, it sucked being in that stadium for however many hours it was. It sucked to realize that they take advantage of people's dreams in the sense that they were requiring people to be in the stands to film like Coca-Cola commercials. They were using these people to make.
They're getting a bunch of filming done.
Exactly. It's very
stock
strategic.
Footage.
Very strategic, and I don't.
Wow.
I knock them on that just because it's like, fuck you guys. What the?
Yeah.
So that said, the jams in the hallways and stuff, you would hear incredible collaborations. I shall never forget kind of being able to walk around and just hear people's raw talent just pouring out all over the place.
There's a bunch of people, they could sing. They're maybe not everybody, but I bet you a few of them are pretty fucking good.
Oh, yeah. It was, and then just to since an opportunity to talk like this is an opportunity to get into the more interesting parts, we were the half of the band that I would say made the poor decision, because the rest of the band, now granted, again, to be accurate, not all of them, because they all attended, they went to the water park, and some of them took acid. So they spent the day going down the water slide on acid, and the rest of us were at the Mile High Stadium being like...
Getting filmed for a Coke commercial.
We're like, I think we picked the wrong move here.
Whoops.
So blessings on my brother for leading the other group.
So when you do you do some regional shows, did you move to Iowa City then? Or
we moved as a band.
You moved as a band to Iowa City.
It was amazing. Now it did, like so many, bands or so many people's efforts, we did burn up within the first year, and it was beautiful. And, the highlights included, we won the Visha Battle of the Bands at, there was still a couple more Vishas after that one, but while it was still a thing.
Yep.
And our winning of it was, to us, hilarious, because we made it past the first round at the M Shop, and then in the finals they had scheduled us to perform first, and we had a performance in Iowa City later that night. So we were the very first band, but there was some miscommunication, and they weren't letting any of the students in the gate, and so we had to play our whole set with all of the hundreds of people there, like 500 to 1,000 feet away. Like they were way back there, and they weren't allowed to come up yet. And so we were made to play, and there's just like a few judges at a table. And in my mind, I'm like, this sucks.
Yeah,
we just got screwed.
Yeah.
And they let the people in towards the end of our set. Whatever, we got like a 20, 30 minute segment, whatever it was. And, with being youthful and wanting it to be an experience, we were finishing out with a song that Scott wrote called The City, which in fact we do still play. Now to answer your earlier question, it's a wonderful song in 7/4. It's got this really cool groove, and my band and I love to rock it out. But we finished with that song, and I was playing violin on it, and on the final hit of the song, I threw my violin bow as far out into the audience as I could, just on this last, yeah! And, crowd screamed. There was tons of people at that point, the energy. We felt so good. I actually remember us getting off of stage, and we were signing breasts. Straight up signing breasts with markers. That was...
Oh, college kids.
Exactly. It felt really cool. I'm going to be real with you. It was cool. So we drove back to Iowa City. We're playing a show there. I can't remember if we were opening for a Dave Matthews cover band or if that was a different time. And if I closed my eyes, it was practically Dave Matthews Band as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But we got the phone call while we were on stage that we had won, even though the audience had been way back there, and my goodness, just for accuracy's sake, I'm realizing I threw the bow actually for the winning performance, not for the students. So they did let the students in, but then we opened the winning, the thing that you get for winning is that we opened for Starlight Run, whoever that is.
Okay.
They, at the time we're like, they have numbers online.
Yeah,
they're a band.
Yeah.
People are excited. That's when I threw the bow out into the crowd of however many, 1,000 people or whatever it is at Visha there. And true story that many years later, I was approached by a young woman who reprimanded me. She was like, "You threw your bow and it hit me in the chest." And she was like, "That hurt. And you could have hit me in the face."
Did she have it still?
Nope.
She could have gave it back.
Right? But it was pretty cool. Like, she wasn't really, really mad, but she definitely was like, "Dude, you fucking hit me with your bow."
Well, I mean, they are, it's not a lawn dart, but it's,
it's a big piece of wood. For rock star moment, I chucked it out there as far as I could. But, bringing it back to your question about, like, that's when we were Iowa City based. We had a number of our first experiences of being, offered a record deal that wasn't real.
Sure.
Those type of we almost got taken advantage of kind of things.
Yeah. We own your firstborn.
Yeah. Yeah. And, a couple attempts at online auditions. We recorded to apply for South by Southwest, and all of those things were beautiful, didn't yield anything. Mm-hmm. We did work a little bit with Creighton Gaynor of Natural Talent Music, who I'm still friends with. He's, I believe, now the new president of Summer of the Arts in Iowa City. So good for him on that appointment or whatever. And, and then to live together as a band, I mean, we had a few hippie shit drum circle nights that were just magic. Just have big jams. And we were all in, some of us are in school, some are not.
I mean, I think of all the benefits of a band living together, that has to be the ability to jam at virtually any time and to create at any time. I think that's I feel like the list kind of goes down considerably after that. Oh
yeah. It, and because we were young, we didn't, I would say we didn't sort of inhabit a gratitude practice for what was happening.
Sure. Well,
we were,
you're kids.
Exactly. We were just young and dumb in those ways. So lots of fun there. And then, we just get to be not very special in that life took us, apart in different directions for relationships or the end of relationships, because we had two couples in the band.
Yeah.
Both couples, those relationships ended. But we made a mark, because I still will run into people who remember River and the Tributaries, remember the shows. We were pretty fond of busking in the Ped Mall as well. Mm-hmm. So kind of bringing a whole rock band down and,
God, I was there the other day. It doesn't look the same. It looks so different now. It's so fucked up.
We were just hopping on the power, plugging into something we could find, run an extension cord across. A couple times the cops would come and be like, "Did you get approval for this?" And I'm like, "No, but isn't the music nice?"
Yeah. Man. So the band implodes.
Yep.
Do you immediately do you go back to Dubuque? Do you stay in Iowa City, or does Canada happen pretty quickly after that?
I ended up falling in love with a woman named Kaylee, who I met in college, and she and I ended up moving to Des Moines.
Okay.
Now, the, hindsight being what it is, and sort of also an offering to, what transpired, because obviously she and I are not together, but still totally cherish her and that relationship and everything. In fact, I just learned that she's pregnant with her new husband, so congratulations there to Kaylee. And she's a big player in the Des Moines scene for venture capital, and was involved with Volunteer Locals, a software a bunch of people are using, all the major music festivals and stuff. So it was cool to be partners with this person who's crushing it over in what she does on the
Yeah.
technical side, but the part for me that marks my story is that when my nephew died in 2011 into 2012 on New Year's Eve,
Right.
that created a need for me to be coming back to Dubuque. And, you know, hindsight being what it is, it's like I actually, at the expense of that relationship, was, whether we were still in Iowa City or when we moved to Des Moines, was coming back, 2-3 weekends a month to be in Dubuque, support my family,
Right.
show up. And, you can't slice that any other way. That's how life goes. And that included a really kind of fraught attempt at an adventure down to North Carolina to join Scott Gratton, where Kaylee and I had moved down there.
Right. I kind of remember that.
Yeah, and the way it sadly worked out is she had actually injured one foot and then severely injured her other foot and needed a big surgery at the university. She had ripped her metatarsal away from her whole foot, and so the result of it was we moved down with the goal of my pursuing music and being a musician, and she was going to run her company from there. She gets injured, has to come home, receive PT and everything, and so she's staying with her family, and all of a sudden I've just moved alone to a place with one friend who's like, I have a wife and a life. I'm only available as much as I'm available, which is no knock on him. That's healthy communication, but it resulted in a very difficult period of I have to pull myself up by my bootstraps, knowing that is a a ridiculous
make some
endeavor.
fucking friends.
So I'm like, I'm playing every freaking open mic. I'm playing every opportunity I can, talking to the host, talking to the bartender, being like, what do you think about this? I was making opportunities. I found a deli that was willing to pay me $50 an hour to play, and I line up a monthly show there, and I'm cobbling together a living with no strategy, survival, just keep your head above water. And frankly, it kind of sucked.
Yeah.
Looking back at it, was well, sometimes you take your shot and it ends up yielding a pretty poor result.
Was that in Asheville, or where were you at?
That was in Raleigh.
Raleigh. Okay, yeah.
And in hindsight, would have been cooler if we'd moved to Durham. It was a little more punk, there was a little more character. Raleigh seemed rather corporate compared to Durham.
There probably could have been a more welcoming scene somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just,
what are you gonna do?
I did my best, and I cherished the couple connections and the friendships, and I met some cool people. But you look back at it, and it's like I ran off to a distant part of the ocean to make some waves, and then they just settle out to nothing, and you're back over in this part of the country.
Yeah, you got to make the run. It's almost more about the run than it is the wave.
Yeah, the 17 and a half hour drive or whatever it is, for the 2 times that I did it, that's pretty much the longest drive I've ever done straight through.
Sure.
And that also sucked.
Yeah, your back hurts after that motherfucker. It sucks.
Yep. So
after North Carolina.
After North Carolina is when I came back and started. At this point, I had established River Glen as my name. I was just I'm not going to have a band name. I'll just use my name. When I came back, I was delighted to find that some of the musicians that I had met, who are my bandmates now, hadn't forgot about me, and they were still interested in working together. And I sort of had been working with my siblings a bit. Jackson was playing violin in the band. Yep. David was playing drums. We had a sort of a rotating cast of bass players kind of thing. We had that it wasn't the drummer every time, it was the bass player.
Yeah, well, drummers and bass players, it's rotating casts. God bless you if you're doing either of those roles. Yeah.
So shout out to a number of people: Rob Martin, Josh Engler, among a few others, and and then the next chapter for me would be marked by I had performed, I believe at Smokestack, at this point, and was approached. I should have been prepared with her name. She uses a pseudonym on Facebook, and that's where my mind is going to, but I'll search for it for a second. Lauren Elaine is a poet.
Yeah.
And she had a fellowship with the Iowa Arts Council. She so graciously approached me after the show with compliments about my lyricism, about my storytelling. I was just like, hey, I'm doing this fellowship. I think you should consider applying for it for next year.
Cool. Okay.
And like that was, and for her to come up to me and say that, I was like, what? Someone has complimented me? Because, being a Breitbach, much like a Hefel, our love language is a bit more like, hey, fuck you.
It's stilted a little bit.
I get, and not that I don't appreciate, any show that I do when something goes really well and someone in the back of the room is like, you're a hack, as their compliment. But she suggested that. At this point, I was already falling in love with a woman named Kara from Canada. And with Kara's help, I approached applying for the fellowship as practice. It was like, well, probably not going to get it, but it's a good thing to try to learn about it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, damn it, got it on the first try. And that was a very transformative experience in terms of, addressing imposter syndrome, in terms of addressing, am I an actual legit artist or am I just a homeschool kid who's scrappy and like building his own thing because I have this, outside of the box thinking from my parents that they gifted me that you can just make your own stuff, which like sometimes works, sometimes doesn't.
Yeah.
And it, to a degree still continues to be this like, have I merged back in? Am I in the arena with everyone else or am I still this outsider doing his own thing? And that's to be, teased out in the years to come. But the fellowship had Veronica O'Hearn as the contact person with the Iowa Arts Council. She no longer works with them, but I could only just pour praise on her for what she did for myself and others to make us feel welcome, build us up.
So the fellowship was because that's just on my list. Like the fellowship was an Iowa Arts Council.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's like it's a you can have it once in your lifetime type of deal. They do, I think, 5 of them every year.
Okay,
that's what it's set at across mediums, and it consists of some professional development. It consists of some engagement like that, which was cool. And it I would also add as a critique, it felt like we were handed a little bit of a lot instead of, giving us opportunities to go deep on fewer subjects. You're like
Sure.
being sent to like weekend retreat type things where you're covering like the entirety of the music business, but you're only getting like 60 minutes on each or 90 minutes.
Oh, interesting.
It's like instead of allowing a track or something where you could just like only work on one thing thoroughly.
It's a crash course, and you're basically getting the basics of the music business that encapsulates kind of a few things.
It's like, sure, you're getting the information delivered from Colleen, who at that time ran the Obama Foundation, and like you get these like big name type people who are there with you, and you're like, oh, that's so special that I'm hearing this from you. How much of it stuck or worked? I mean, some, my class, I'm give some shout outs here. It's like Jack Meggers, filmmaker back out in LA. I especially want to highlight that Rachel Yoder, the author of Night Bitch, which is now a movie starring Amy, is it Amy Adams or Amy McAdams?
I think it's Amy Adams.
Amy Adams. There's Rachel McAdams.
Yep.
So Amy Adams, partnered with her and made this movie, and like she's, fantastic. And then Lee Running, she's in Omaha now, and her work is weird, beautifully weird, avant-garde, like find roadkill, photograph it, put it in a vat of acid, polish the bones up, like drill them hollow and coat the inside of the bones in gold, and then put them back in the exact configuration she found them dead on the highway, and then like photograph them that way and display them.
Wow.
Like weird artsy shit. That's pretty fucking cool. And
so these are all people that got the fellowship along with you.
This was my class.
Yeah.
And it's for shame I'm I'm reaching to find the name because she's so wonderful and she's a muralist. What a shame that her name is not available to me in this moment. Everyone's gonna have to look it up. It's going in the show notes. I'm just saying that. But so that experience, it built off of a sort of cobbled together music education. I mean, yourself included. I've had some opportunities recently to acknowledge, like, I learned some important lessons from you early on. And, no need for you to, like, pick that up even, but just, like, that's what that meant to me.
Me barking things at you is not an education, all right?
Well, no, but I'm going to take a slight detour before I finish about the fellowship to say that, like, you, like I said to you the other night, you're the first person who talked to me about supply and demand, and, like, you reach a tipping point where it's like you got to start treating it as a market and, like, limit the amount of times you're playing and go play elsewhere, and that's how you can get onto a ticket price. And now I am like over and over again repeating your words to other people, describing my experience with a bit of, like, wish I'd have listened sooner, even though that's what happens when you're young and you don't. There's advice my brother gives me about how to say no to gigs so you can say yes to the gigs that pay what you're worth. And you got to start by saying no, or you will be booked and stop looking.
Yep.
And things like that. And especially juicy, since I feel like podcasts like this are a great moment for this. You actually also, I thought very skillfully, and, like, I really appreciated this. You called me out one time. Because River and the Tributaries, we had Aaron Headley on the bass.
Yeah.
And then you were in a band called Kerosene Circuit.
Yeah.
And Aaron was in that band as well.
Absolutely.
And I remember being at a show in the basement of Monk's. I was watching y'all, and I carelessly made some remark to another member of the audience about, it was something, and maybe I've twisted it in my memory, it was something about either wishing that Aaron was the lead singer or commenting that I preferred her vocals over the other singers in the band, which was another Eagle brother. Am I remembering correctly?
Well, John played drums. It was myself and Roger Benz.
That's it, Roger, yes.
Yeah.
So you guys were singing, and I, like, in my mind, I'm just remarking on Aaron.
Sure.
And then a number of days later, I end up on the phone with you trying to book a gig at the Lift.
Okay.
And you handled the business, and then you're like, hey, do you have a moment for me to address something with you? I was like, I do. And you're like, hey, as a professional note, like smack talking another band in town, like, at their show. And I don't mean to, like, put words in your mouth, but you offer to, like, hey, like, be careful with your words, like, because those words made it back to me. And it's not like you were like, oh, my feelings are hurt, but I gotta say that, like, that actually, like, in a survivable way, like, I got called out for saying some shit, and this isn't a you thing, it's a me thing, that, like, it's been this little rosary bead that I return to of, like, that's why you say nice things and you are mindful of when you share your critiques.
Well, have your own opinion. Yeah. Absolutely. You're more than welcome to all. Anyone is welcome. I mean, I think that's what we're fucking dealing with right now.
Yeah.
In a little way, but have your own opinion, however the fuck. But yeah, if you're saying something like that with an earshot or something, you're almost making a point that way.
Yeah.
And that point is maybe not what you're trying to do. I don't know.
That's all I'm saying is it has actually, like, stuck with me. So thank you for that. Because you know what you saved me is, like, fucking up somewhere else where it would have cost me something. Instead, I have you as a friend who, you were just so firm but direct.
Well, it's only because I've shoved my foot in my own fucking mouth a number of times, and it just to I've attempted to learn from it. Yeah.
And so getting back to this timeline thing from that is, the Iowa Arts Council, before it got, and I don't mean to overspeak here, but with changes in the state politics, it's been transformed, and I'm gonna say it's been, robbed of some of its vitality and, like, shifted. And I don't mean that as an insult to anyone who's still involved in trying to make the most of what is available, but the current administration is not, let's just say
super arty.
Yeah, exactly. They're not really wokey.
Yeah.
And so the Arts Council likes their fellows to then move on to a big project, which is how the As Above, So Below idea was born.
Okay, so that is like As Above, So Below is kind of like the culmination of the Iowa Arts Council fellowship.
It is. And
Okay.
I the way it first came to me was I could make the most Iowa record ever made if I get the most Iowans on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that set me off on this mission, which took years and like an amount of money I'd be embarrassed to actually like fully investigate, all things considered, because I ran a Kickstarter campaign and raised like something like $7,500. I was awarded another grant of $10,000 by the state, and then I stopped counting. This is where you get into it. Like I stopped counting when I had poured like $20,000 into creating this record, and that was. I was just putting the entirety of my life for a couple of years while trying to be in love with a woman in another country and traveling back and forth. And so in a number of ways, there's been some mercies in my story, which is that I didn't have to make certain decisions myself. I don't know if I could have succeeded. And one is that once you have started a project like that, how do you stop?
Right.
It was this like, this mission of I'm trying to get as many people as possible. I've got certain people I'm courting, such as Greg Brown, where I was like working his friend group onto the record so that I could present him as like, I've got all your people on it.
Right,
Would you
right.
please also be on it? And we never got there because I had some health issues myself, but more importantly, the pandemic started.
Yes.
And I had my ass hanging out, this project not finished. And we had to hard pivot. The motto I was using was shut it down. I was just at this point just bleeding money out to people while creating something beautiful and having a beautiful experience, making sure that I was offering a beautiful experience to those participating in it,
Yeah.
even if they didn't need to know at what cost, for me. But we just like cauterized any loose ends. There's people like Dave Helmer from Iowa City, from the Dave Helmer Band in Crystal City, who he and I know exactly the part he was going to play slide guitar on this one part on the song, and only he and I will hear the absence of that part. No one else is going to know that was supposed to be there. Things of that nature for all the people who got caught or never got asked. Like we never got around to asking Greg Brown because we hadn't finished the mission of
So you had the
courtship.
record like kind of mostly done. There were overdubs that needed to be added.
Overdubs / I started hiring people to do remote recording sessions from wherever they were.
Yeah.
To just be like, you have this space. Whatever you send me is what I have to use, and I have to trust that you're going to make it. And, the motto of the record is it's a patchwork quilt, so it doesn't need, in a lot of ways, it wasn't the goal to make it seamless and perfect. I was trying to ask every artist to authentically be themselves in their sound, whether I was utilizing them within their like quote unquote native genre or plugging their sound into a different style and sort of making a fun like genre blendy song. So because the record has everything from a bit more like Dave Zolo roots rock to Bob Black and Annie Savage like bluegrassy song to the New Orleans march with the NOLA Jazz Band. There's a more of a hip hop track with a number of area rappers on it, including MC Animosity.
Oh, nice.
Wooly, formerly Lyric at that time. And a number of other guys, would that I could name everybody in the situation. But yeah, and that record became a burden. And the mercy of the pandemic is that like the record stopped. It's also what forced my hand to go across the border. And that's where my Canadian adventure started, because it had been a conversation with Kara about going to Canada to be with her, because she had made the decision after the 2016 election that she was unwilling to move to the US.
Sure.
And, can't fault her on that.
Nope.
And so it saved me from the potential like inability to make that decision or figuring out how the heck I was going to do that. Instead, I just showed up at the militarized border with a marriage license, got denied, went to a photo kiosk, paid for an immigration application, and printed on a glossy piece of photo paper the barcode of the receipt, brought a barcode photo back to the border, and they're like confused, but they're like, yeah, sure, you bought your way in, get in there.
Wow.
And, to my, naivety at the time, I crossed that border and I didn't come back for 3 years. And that was due primarily to, the pandemic, and then what started to happen in Ukraine, strangely enough, because my application it took so long to process. And they even, interestingly, sent a little notice being like, we're prioritizing Ukrainian applications, which
interesting.
I have no opinion on that, but it's just like an interesting thing. And I have opinions, but relative and relevant to what we're talking about.
Sure.
And there is a sadness around the fact that what could have been with the As Above solo record, what was intended for its release tour, it really got just the knees taken out.
Yeah.
Whether it was artists letting me know that they wouldn't be comfortable being a part of a big production, so there was really no way to pull off.
There's no way to tour.
There was no way to represent the record.
Yeah.
There was no support from the Arts Council any longer. I
was going to ask, like, did they didn't like give you a grace period or like some extra time or anything like that? Or
to their credit, they deserve to be applauded for how wonderfully supportive and flexible they are with artists, because it has in it that I had also applied for yet a different grant that was going to be a part of a different effort, but then here I find myself stuck in a different country, and instead of forfeiting the grant, I talked to them and I just explained like, hey, I don't want to be unethical or do anything wrong. I'm in this other country. I will return the money if you want me to, or if you want me to put it into the hands of Iowa artists, like the goal of the application was, I will still run the event from here remotely and put all that money into these artists' hands. And they were like, do that. Now, with the shakeup, whenever it happened, I'm sure it happens each year to some degree, but whatever changes occurred in the Arts Council, the Department of Cultural Affairs, and post-pandemic, the communication to me was loving, like, hey, at a certain point, we just got to draw a line and we got to like start fresh and move forward. We can't get caught up in a forever cycle of finishing things out. So this endeavor that was, started as this Iowa Arts Council, it just turned into a River record.
Right.
I did what I could to continue celebrating everyone. The liner notes they include URLs to the projects of
everybody
most guests.
Yeah.
So just to allow folks to be like, I love that person's voice. Oh, look, I can go listen to their music too.
No, that's a really thoughtful way to do it, man. I think that's important that you did that.
Well, it was even as altruistic as like, send me your headshot. We're gonna have a picture of your headshot. And like 5 artists sent me headshots. And I was like, never mind. Musicians are like herding cats. Like, and surprisingly,
I'll get it to you.
You know who one of the 5 was? Jimmy Berg. Berg got me a headshot.
Yeah, he's probably got it ready.
So that release in 2023 actually contributed to the end of my marriage. Because, when you're in love and the compromise and there's all, I don't need to spell that out for people, but it was the way in which, among a bouquet, a constellation of other complicated factors, my return from the release tour, which was so nourishing to me. I hadn't seen my bandmates. They had wondered if we were done, if it was ever going to happen again. And the performances and the audience and just like that magic, that experience when I returned to Canada, was reflected back to me by Kara as like, are you aware that you're full of the light that has been fading from you in the last couple of years while you've been here? You're like alive in a way that's been missing. And part of that is, the pandemic hurt the music industry up there as well. And when you're the new guy, when you're the new guy who like has to work illegally under the table because your application isn't through and nothing I can do is official, and it just creates these hurdles, and I have no standing, and it's how do you earn standing like post-pandemic? And up there they had like vaccine passports, like you couldn't go into spaces if you couldn't show your vaccine passport. And so, not the ideal time for trying to like get as much exposure as possible. And exposure is a funny word in that moment. To be like, I got to earn some new fans. And it's like just an
super spreader. Great.
An impossible task. And so, life is that complex, that things that are so beautiful are also, they have this grief in them, and that like releasing that album resulted in Kara and I deciding, well, it contributed rather, to be accurate, in our making that decision. And
it's nice that she was able to recognize it.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. I mean, she's a good woman, a good human, good person. And that, it's a well I still draw from. I talked to her the other day, actually. So the chapter I find myself in now is that, we make that decision. We spend several months separating, kind of like hiring a therapist, working with him to make sure we're really making this decision, and then processing it. And of course, as I'm sure many listeners can understand, that experience just kickstarted so much creativity. I'm like, the heartbreak of loving somebody and sort of slowly pulling away from them, and then moving her to a smaller apartment so she could live alone, and like getting in my van and driving out of that country to being full-time on the road until now.
Yeah.
Which like is important to me, to be proud of the fact that it's working, but also be very certain I don't oversell, or I don't want to inspire anyone to do what I do. In fact, I'd be inclined to tell people, don't do what I'm doing. And then those of you who have to and must will.
Yeah.
That's how I think about it.
I think you're right there. I think that the musician's life, they're all different, and they're all the same in different ways, and it is generally bumpy. It is a bumpy road.
And it's lonely.
Yeah,
that's the part. That's the part I'm worried. I don't fear for my friends who are touring musicians so much about the sex, drugs, and rock and roll part. Though, I mean, let's be real. Like, fentanyl's an issue and all sorts of risks.
Yeah, I mean, if you're partying a certain way, you should definitely be trying to be careful as you can be if you're partying a certain way. It's
and that's just like those substances versus just having everybody be careful with alcohol and driving and this and that. Like, just wanting people to be safe. But my concern is actually more around like, can my friends or people who are inspired by what I'm doing, do they have the temperament to eat correctly and to rest properly?
Right.
And those, I've taken a number of people out, and, I'm a pretty, gentle criticizer, or like a nudger of that kind of sense, but I've got plenty of judgments about, reminding musicians.
Gas station hot dogs are not going to last.
That fast food is actually costing you more than just drinking water and being hungry.
Yeah.
And between that and just, it's a lot to go between the life of the party, the reason people are having a good time. They want to celebrate you. They want to pour the love on you. They all want a piece of you. They want to be in that moment with you. And then like a Groundhog's Day montage of driver's side door closing, silence in the van.
Yep.
And just bam, over. And I guess somewhere between the lostness of ending a marriage, leaving this country I'd immigrated to come back home from Canada to the U.S., between that and being homeschooled, having the upbringing that I did, I have, and the family band as well, I have the temperament for it.
Sure.
And
no, it is. It's a huge emotional give that you or any musician who's really fucking doing it. It's a huge emotional give that you guys do on stage. And then, like you're saying, like the door closes and then you're just kind of left, not necessarily empty, but the accolades only do so much.
Yeah.
Or the, knowing you have this great ability only does so much. It's like you still need to have someone to talk to.
Yeah. It's like you can only cash it in certain instances. Otherwise it doesn't carry much currency or weight.
Yep.
And I would tie that in too with the, at least in my like adventure and experience, is that being sort of Iowa nice, pretty polite, and in my travels, I am the Iowa guy to so many people. I'm memorable for being named River. I have long hair, and whatever, an outgoing personality that is memorable. And then it's like that I'm from Iowa. Those are the things far and wide. And I took my heartbreak and went out on the road, and I was hitting it hard right away, and had. I've had a couple of instances of realizing like, oh shit, outside of, quick hugs with people at the merch table, which I like to hug audience members if they want to hug me, I'm into that. But the realization of like, no one hugs me or like touches me. And that just on that, like, like gotta be careful as an animal, a human being, to be like moving through the world, like being like, oh, gee whiz, why am I sad as fuck? Right. Why do I feel like unloved and just being like, oh,
everything's a transaction.
Maybe it would help if someone just held my hand for a little bit. And so, in the like swinging pendulum of like fun experience, that's like when something shifted for me, and I started noticing, for instance, like the advances of people at shows and the sort of like the offers that were being made that I was sort of politely unwilling to see, and I've sort of quickly like swung the pendulum that way and started like seeing what that was like, and I've quickly been also grateful to have survived a number of instances and been like, what, maybe that's also grass is greener on the other side thing. Like, I'm happy for whoever has their adventures.
You got to try it out a little bit, but I mean, you've lived enough to know that when it's time to maybe get the hell out of there.
I'm it's funny I'm 35 now and have been in 3 monogamous relationships for like close to 18 years. Mm-hmm. So it's, my time of being a single person, especially as a musician, I'm grateful to be doing it now in my 30s, much more well equipped. And that doesn't mean that it's not without like missteps or uncomfortable, awkward situations. And to anyone listening who is one of those people, like, I would hope they understand I cherish every one of them, even the ones where you're like, we probably shouldn't have done this.
Right.
Those kinds of things. That is, it's all part of the story, but that's, again, with like, it's important to me to speak accurately about the experience, and more or less I discourage people from doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Just because it feels a kinder move.
Yeah, like you said, if you're truly meant to do it, you just will.
Artist as affliction.
Yeah,
is how that comes to my mind. You're like, don't know why I feel the need that I must do this. Why do I need to write songs about the way the world is? Because I've also, in the past couple of years, really owned and leaned into the fact that I'm a very political artist. Mm-hmm. And I'm finding my own way of doing it, of trying to keep this balance about it's tasty, it's music, they're meant to be little stories or little, they're vibes you enter into for a few minutes, and they've each got their own character, their own feel, and the musicianship is flashy and it's impressive, and the singing is dexterous and it's full of passion and everything. And also there's some real message throughout all the songs, and it's my goal to kind of keep feeding people sneaky vegetables without being too soapboxy, too preachy. And I often do that through not telling people what to do in the songs, but rather just trying to describe the way it is.
Telling the story.
Because if you say the way it is, sometimes there's a damning critique in it. If you can just really accurately, I have a number of songs about grief and death that I've learned to be more responsible with, but at first I was just going out passionately ripping people open with these songs about grief and death without any sort of awareness about like suturing them up afterwards.
Right.
And the cost it was creating for me before I learned to be more responsible and to, sort of invite people into that moment and then invite them to finish that moment in a show, is that it would result in like absolutely comical, and I don't mean this to be rude to any of the people who did it, but comical in the sense of I'm at the merch table after the show.
Yeah.
I'm trying to sell my merch. That's where the money is.
And you're going to be...
And I'm being held by someone who's sobbing.
Yeah, people are going to be...
I'm like, dude, I really, really mean this hug for you, but like, do you have to cry on me now? This is my window to sell stuff.
And they're like, motherfucker, you just sang that song? Yep. Yeah. Yep, so, you made me do this. Yeah. So yes, you're gonna have to kind of, and I understand what you're saying, like, maybe with your newer material, tempering that, because as a person who loves sad bastard music, it can be a lot for other people, in your listening sphere, like, they're like, yeah, this is bumming me the fuck out. And you're like, what?
Yeah,
this is what I listen to all the time.
Yeah. Well, and people are surprised because I, as a rather upbeat and optimistic person. I'm a terribly anxious person and all sorts of stuff like that too, and doing the work to try and address some of those things. But by and large, people understand me to be like a little bright spot of optimism, and I'm always willing to bring the cheer up a little bit.
Sure.
Honor everybody and like really truly share space with them. But if you really listen to what I'm saying, I am not saying happy things.
And you can't all the time. You can't.
I can't.
It's just it. I understand what you're saying, and you are, man. Like you do generally have a positive vibe. I would have to say, most of the time that whenever I've seen you, so I could understand why that would be jarring to somebody if they did maybe like pay attention and hear what you're saying. But that just makes you human. Right.
And I can frame it because I've grown an understanding of it. The reason that I love people the way I do, and the reason I share the time with them the way I do, is because I can't get over this existential awareness that we're dying. Like that, to me, like that heartbreak, for reasons, which would be a whole nother interview, whatever, but for reasons, I carry this mark of being just like deeply heartbroken about the fact that like my parents are dying. They're not dying right now. Yeah, like our death is walking with us. I don't know when I'm saying goodbye to people for the last time, and I'm doing all this touring. I really try and lean into a very like honor the fact that we don't get control of that. We don't get to know. And because would that I could, I don't, it's like a Matrix thing. I don't want to get rid of the heartache. I don't want it to go away and go back into the Matrix.
No, if you knew everything, it wouldn't be this.
And then also like, I'm also not going to, I guess rather I'm like fortunate enough to have the education and the ability, the skill set to interpret that as like, I don't get a choice in the matter. The human thing's been going on for countless generations, and, technology be damned, the human thing is pretty much the same. Like as far as our relating and love and what matters in life, food and sex and company and dancing. And we didn't need anything created in the last couple of years to be human, to do it well. And therefore, in recognizing all the, privilege, not just as a white man, but like privilege for living now. I got to, have antibiotics, save my foot in 2019.
Yeah.
Like seriously almost lost my foot. And those are privileges. And so if everybody else, lived their life, showed up, did the thing, then I can sort of faithfully show up and do the thing too, and choose to let that heartache turn into lifting others up and being there for them. Even though you're right that I'm still at an inner battle about like, you can't be that all the time. And it feels like such a defeat when I'm not that. But
what's on the plate? What's coming up?
Yes. So in the very near future, I will travel down to New Orleans. I will do the Mardi Gras thing with my people down there. It's always an honor and a privilege.
You're playing Chicky-Wah-Wah, aren't you?
I am going to play Chicky-Wah-Wah.
Oh, you're playing with Carrie Hudson and Lou Shields.
Yeah.
I had Blue Mountain play Dubuque Fest in probably 2009 or 10 or something like that.
Dude, do you want me to tell him that he owes you some money still, or
no?
No, okay.
No. They were they were amazing. It was very, very cool to get to work with them. I wish as so many other things that I've brought to town. I wish that more people knew who the fuck they were.
Yeah.
But it was cool to get to work with them, and that's awesome that you're doing that show.
Yeah. Well, that actually deserves like a secondary compliment of like, no joke, you have brought so many people through town. And for shame, that's a small piece for all of us to share that we weren't there in large numbers time and time again at, festivals, at venues to show up. But the Chikiwawa show is really cool. It feels great to have a foot in the door. They're kind of considering that a little bit of a test.
Sure.
For me to see about a standing relationship for future endeavors. And then I'm playing a couple speakeasies and my band is coming down.
Oh, nice.
So that feels really special because I've been going down there once or twice a year since except for the 3 years in Canada, but since 2017. So I got a few years in of getting down there and building an audience, and there's some value to being different. I'm not done, boom, 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 which is endlessly
amazing,
delicious,
but it's there.
But it's refreshing to folks to have somebody doing something else. At least that's the feedback I'm getting. So I'll play the shows in New Orleans. I'll have my new record that I recorded during the pandemic in Canada. That'll come out in April.
Oh, what's that?
So that, I'm calling it Poignant Folk Pop. I'm just doing a slight rebrand. I'm going to invite people to refer to me as River. Still for internet purposes, River Glen Music across social media. But they are this new batch of songs that are the most pointed and sad and political, and yet it's just an absolutely delicious record featuring remotely a number of guests like Christina Castaneda, Megan Elizabeth, Abby Sawyer,
Sweet.
Diana Weisar, and on and on and on. But it also is a record that for the first time features me really elevated on a pedestal as the front and the center and the core, and my voice is intimate and soft and forward mixed, and it's the answer to doing the big sharing of As Above So Below and inviting everyone on the record. I'm making this record and it's just about me, and everyone on it is to support me.
Right on.
And that'll come out in April, and I'll swing through on a release tour with shows at Lefties in Des Moines and Trumpet Blossom in Iowa City and Octopus in Cedar Falls and The Goose and Chicago, which I still got to lock down that venue. But that's what's coming up. I'm in the bigger picture. The band and I have a couple of dates throughout the year, but this is my opportunity to share that we kind of wonderfully have this question mark. We're going to cut a record towards the end of the year with Darren Hushak from Pinnacle Sound. That's exciting because more than just any show, we can make something that we'll be able to share over and over and really, bring the whole band into the spotlight, because my bandmates are the reason that As Above So Below worked. They were, the skeleton on which we got to, they were also like the connective fascia and stuff like
sure.
that. They made that work. Which I don't think just anybody could do and be like genre hopping like they did, yet make it sound like my sound.
No, the band is...
It's hot. Yeah. It's so fun. And beyond that, we kind of have a lovely problem in front of us. And it's for us to lean into and really explore, which is that we don't assume that we will get to continue being a band. Mm-hmm. For the reasons of life, the cost of living, who knows when the next pandemic is, who knows who's going to fall in love, who's going to have kids, which of them is going to be offered some insane opportunity. I mean, Dan Padley is currently tours with Deb Talon as well. Yep. And so, I'm honored to be the sort of second in line in booking of this incredible musician named Dan behind Deb. And we get to ask ourselves, what's our plan? What are we doing? And what are we aiming for? Adding more intention behind our efforts rather than how can we just make a cool one-off show happen? Which includes everything from could we get an agent? Could we get a manager? Could we? And it just kind of opens up this conversation, because as I see it, I'm working a broader tour routing that I've constructed to bring me to where each of my family members lives.
Right.
Therefore, like, it's efficient for me, and it also checks that existential box of like, I'm doing what I love and I'm seeing my family consistently. I'm being a part of their lives. I'm there for my nieces, nephews. I'm a part of their growing up. You know, I get to truly know them and they really know me. And so that is important, and it comes at a cost. You know, I get to have my own wrestlings with being jealous and envious to varying degrees of artists who stay put, and they become a bigger fish in a smaller pond. And then I like long for what they have. Yet I know that, you know, not as a criticism of them, that like they don't have the ability to go play shows in Ohio and in Pennsylvania and in New York and in Vermont. Like they don't, you know, not that I'm, again, with being accurate, I'm not a big artist. I'm a tiny artist with a very meaningful fan base that's small in numbers but mighty in their commitment. I know the faces who will show up. I know the people who will come out not for charity because of that deep nourishment they're getting from the music. And so the hope for me is that, much like, you know, a fresh rain and the way mushrooms will pop up, is like, I've got this foundation laid with a lucky break or a little bit of traction or something. Who knows what it could turn into and how quickly. The challenge there being that is something I'm building primarily for myself. Mm-hmm. And as you know, once you bring a band, it is an entirely different animal. None of it makes the same amount of sense anymore. You need different amounts of money, different venues,
keep people happy,
and different sleeping arrangements. It just, the whole thing changes. So I'm very somewhere between conservative and reluctant to do very much with the band.
Right.
Because of my care for them, because of wanting to take good care of them.
It would be tough.
And I don't think that they, with the level of talent they have, we don't deserve to go back out the way that so many have, you know, been broke for years while you build that thing up. That's just not going to work for us. We're too far along in our lives, you know. Megan married to having 2 daughters, and like, she's got a responsibility there. Other members of the band have their responsibilities to their work and their teaching and this and that. So we get to have this lovely problem, which is my way of saying, if someone's listening who's like, I'm your manager or I'm your booking agent, we'll holler at a guy and let's talk. 'Cause we've got to figure that out, not in any sort of urgent, like, oh shit, the band's over at the end of the year, but with a mature acceptance that there are no guarantees. Such an obvious statement, but to really apply it with intention in all that we do right now moving forward, which is also a way of saying that I don't believe that I can take us there. Like, with the sacrifices that I have chosen in order to live the life, you know, and maybe it'll require that I make changes, but you know, when I'm also the driver, the performer, the booker, the promoter, all these things, I can't.
Oh, you're doing all the jobs. I mean, it will.
Yeah. Everyone listening gets what I mean, is like there are no more hours in the day.
Yep.
And like, would that I could just be better at the jobs, but I don't even have the time to like practice. And that's not that I'm a victim of anything. I have chosen this. And so therefore I am, you know, paying the price of this choice. But that is what factors into this conversation with my band of like, do I need to make a change? What are we doing? Because it's very beautiful. It feels very magical. I am delighted to watch excitement grow in them very recently around like feeling just that little bit of like the bug. You get bitten by it, and they got the like, what we're doing is so special. Could we? Can we? Is it going to happen? And, you know, lovingly, my response is like, better to assume not and work that way, like with intention, because the journey is the destination, and all those corny remarks of like, we got to cherish it while we're doing it.
Yeah.
That's why we're focusing on another record. You know, they know, because I tell them I love them all the time, and they know that any success that I achieve, there will be always an open door and an invitation. But that bit of sadness that comes around like being so excited about what we do while embracing that it's harder than, maybe not appropriate to say harder than it's ever been, but
it's just a hard thing.
It's just a hard thing to be an artist, and it kind of blows in a lot of ways. And so somewhere in there, I'm, you know, cobbling together a living and nursing a dream and trying to do that with these other musicians and just trying to be a good person and like love my family and love my people.
Man, I feel that. And I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me.
Yeah. Oh, Aaron, my pleasure.
Thank you much, River.
Yeah. Peace, everybody.